Hey everyone, welcome to the deep dive with Thalia. Oh, I said that really weird. The deep dive with Thalia. Um, it's not very often that a convicted killer, dare I say serial killer, writes a book. Usually when they do, it's probably in prison, and it's usually a biography. But today, that is the case. We have a author turned prophet turned serial killer, um, or cult leader, I guess, who has written a slew of books, who has written books that I feel like prophesize the crime. Chad Guy Daybell, this guy right here, he said he was a prophet. He said he foretold the future. And guess what? He did. Because in his books, he, I feel like, gave us clues and insight. This book was written in 1999. Um, and it has signs that he could commit crimes like he is guilty of in the future. That's what I believe, at least. Now this is gonna be a very casual live. I know that no, I know that it's probably not the funnest thing to read Chad's books. From what I've heard of them, they're very let's just say like elementary, but in a way I feel like fascinating because there's a lot of weird, morbid elements to them. And we're gonna read them for the first time, or I'm gonna read them for the first time here on live. It's not gonna be a I read it so you don't have to, because we're gonna read them together. Um, so yeah, you know what? Let's grab an adult beverage. I drink like once a quarter of a year. Today we have an Austin East Cider. Anybody from Texas? I don't know. I feel like we're gonna need it. Also, I'm trying out a new microphone placement. Hopefully, it. I don't know. The reason I put it so high up the last time was because ooh, look at that ASMR. Hold on. Can y'all hear that? Okay. Anyway, the reason I put it so high up the last time was because I uh I don't know, I keep breathing into the mic, but I realize the sound is not as good as if I had it like under me. And I always think of that like line the prosecutor kept saying in the Chad Daybell case where she's like, the mics are directional. I'm like, maybe this is directional. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. So thank you for sticking with me. But if I breathe into it, I apologize. Hopefully I'll change that. Because obviously, like I said, we don't want an Audrey Bergaterio situation. I know it's a little bit annoying. I know that like when people talk on the phone, they're like breathing. It's annoying. Also for hydration, we're gonna put a little bit of like hydration drops in there. I put it in a mug. These are great, by the way. Buoy. I fell for the ads, and you know what? They're amazing. They also have a chronic illness discount. So if you are one of those chronic illness girlies who needs like constant hydration, I'm always dehydrated. I'm always forgetting to drink water. This is great. I got them from my dad as well. Anyway, so yeah, that's what we're gonna do tonight. We have our emotional support beverage. We also have more hydration because drinking water is important. And I also have my emotional support squishmallow. Hold on. I forgot his name. I bought him a while back, but he's like this fluffy unicorn, black unicorn. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do tonight. We're going to be reading. Oh, I didn't even tell you the book we're reading. We're reading An Errand for Emma by Chad Guy Daybell. This is a book that I bought online. This is very hard to find. I think it's because, if I'm not mistaken, this is his first book, if you don't count the murder mystery he wrote in like 4th grade. But this is kind of the start of where it happened. It was written in 1999. Like I said, it's written by Chad Daybell. This is also a used copy because I would never buy from a Chad's like book company, although I don't think that they sell books anymore, and that's why this one was really hard to find. You know what? Let's go ahead and read the bio and see what we're writing. Also, I just wanted to note before we start, I'm not doing this to like make fun of him. I'm not doing this to like like I said, I wanted to read the Loin Fire text. I feel like it would be kind of like comic relief. Like, I understand the gravity of these books. I think that I really wish I was a psychologist because there's a lot to unpack when you hear the themes in these books, and it's often kind of sad. Sorry, I'm already doing a bad job. It's kind of sad in the way that like I don't know. Everything's just different now. Now that you know what he's convicted of, I think reading these books um, has a different feeling. Not that I would read them in the first place, but I think for many, you know, apocalyptic end of days books were very popular in LDS culture. I mean, this was a library book. And, you know, I'm sure people checked it out. I'm not sure. Actually, maybe they weeded it out because nobody checked it out. But, you know, people read these books thinking they're harmless. But then when you find out that the person who wrote this book is a 3-time convicted murderer, probably should be like 5-time, but you know, those are alleged. You just think about it differently, and I completely understand that. And if we need to take breaks or stop and think and talk about things, I will. I think that, you know, if you're expecting an audiobook or something like that, which I don't think any of y'all are, that's not what we're doing. We're going to read it, but also talk about it. Like I said, maybe when I read the Loin Fire text, I'll be a little bit more like critical or like a little bit more like lighthearted. But if I ever do like, you know, a joke or like comic relief, it's not because I'm making fun of the situation. It's just because Chad is ridiculous. And I don't think that he should be taken seriously in the way that he wants to. I think that, yeah. Also, I'm going to get this out of the way because I feel like I'm going to like knock this over. If I need it, I will have it. But yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead and take a little drink again. I don't know how old these are. I mean, I don't think cider does not expire, but interesting. Anyway, so yeah, let's go ahead and go into An Errand for Emma. This is the first book of the Emma trilogy. I have the other 2 books on the way. And like I said, I'm kind of going to try to go in order. I don't know how well I'm going to do, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to start at the beginning and see, like, you know, like authors' first books are always like the first like insight into like what they were thinking when they first started to be writers or when they first started writing. But like I said, before we start, we are going to read his bio. And like I said, here is a picture of this guy. Yeah. Okay. So Chad Guy Daybell lives in Springville, Utah with his wife, Tammy, and their 5 children. He graduated from BYU with a bachelor's degree in journalism, where he served as the city editor of the Daily Universe. Following graduation, he worked for 3 years as a copy editor at the Standard Examiner in Ogden, Utah, before returning to his hometown to serve at Springville Cemetery sexton. I just want to note that he often talks about how he wrote for a newspaper, and that's why his writing is really bad. I don't think that's an excuse. But, you know, after 4 years with a unique profession, he accepted employment as the manager of a computer supply company in Provo, Utah. Chad served as LDS mission among the Spanish-speaking people of New Jersey. And that will come into play in the next few books. And he has served in several capacities in the church. Also, you know what? I'm gonna think of it because Chad says that he like knew Spanish. I've never heard him speak Spanish, but maybe maybe he just doesn't remember it. Because again, his mission was when he was in his 20s. He enjoys spending time with his wife and children, following the local sports team, and working in his yard. No comment. So he welcomes your comments on his internet website. Like I said, this book was written in like 1999. So his internet website, cdaybell.com. where you can ask him questions about the Emma trilogy and read about the true stories that inspired it. The website also has a collection of specific prophecies Chad used to shape Escape to Zion. So stop in the site and say hello. I'm going to see if this book or if his website's like still going. I assume that you have to pay like, what is it called? Like, it's not a username. As you can tell, I am just super articulate. And that's why I'm not critiquing. I will critique his writing, but not because I'm a good writer. Although I was told in school I was, but I'm not at school anymore. So, but my vocabulary kind of gone down the drain. Anyway, it says the server cannot be found. I don't know if that means that my internet's weird or that. Sorry, I'm taking off my socks because my feet are hot. Okay. So yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue. We've already been talking for 10 minutes and we haven't started reading the book. So this is, like I said, a casual, like it's like a story time, but the story's bad. So we're going to continue. An Errand for Emma. And the clicking you're hearing is, this is a paperback cover that it's like this hard plastic. I work at a library. We don't use this stuff. We use like the soft kind of like film. This one's like super hard, but anytime I turn the page, it like clicks. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, so An Errand for Emma, property of, I think it says Pineview Library. Usually when we weed out books, we cross out the name and the barcode just so people know that like they don't have to return it back to the library if they find it. So yeah. Copyright 1999 by Chad G. Daybell. All rights reserved. Let's see. Cedar Fort Incorporated in Springville, Utah. Cover design was by Lyle Mortimer, Adam Ford, Corinne E. Bischoff, Rebecca D. Shanderl. I don't know any of these people. Okay. So this is kind of, like I said, there's times where we will make fun of Chad, but this is just one of those things that's heartbreaking. He dedicated this book and many others it says, to Tammy, my wife and best friend. Her inspiring ideas and suggestions made this book possible. And as we all know, Tammy was really the person behind the book company when they started it. I mean, this is not a Spring Creek Book Company is different. It was after this. But I feel like Chad just thought, okay, I can write and then let Tammy do the rest. That's what I feel like. I feel like maybe he was, being a little lazy. Anyway, but it's just super sad to see that dedication, considering what he's convicted of and what he's done and what he thought of Tammy when she died. So, okay, let's continue. Okay, so chapter 1. I tumbled down the Wilkinson Center stairs, bounced off a wall, and rolled to a stop. I rubbed my bruised knees as one of my Brigham Young University classmates rushed to my side. Emma, you look terrible, he said. Are you all right? Okay, first of all, she tumbled down the stairs, bounced off a wall, and rolled to a stop. I think like she would probably be like passed out or like have a broken neck or something, not just like get up. And no, they wouldn't be like, you look terrible. Are you all right? Like if you're laying on you just bounced off the stairs. Of course I'm not all right. Like also this is why I look terrible. Anyway, she says, I think so. My knees took the worst of it. I gathered up my scattered textbooks and he helped me to my feet. Not to be critical of the first few lines, but you would never go to somebody that just fell down the stairs and be like, that looked terrible. Like, you'd be like, are you okay? I think one underlying theme you'll find in Chad's books is that he doesn't understand people, which could allude to the fact that I think he might be like a psychopath or something. He has some sort of personality disorder. He said, okay, so sorry, let's continue. Like I said, this is not an audiobook. If you want an audiobook, I mean, don't buy it, but whatever. Anyway, wow, I was sure you cracked your head open. I'm afraid this happens too often, I said. I've had the worst falls. My feet just do what they want sometimes. Poor little Emma's just so clumsy. Also, If you're not aware, Emma is actually the name of Chad's first daughter. She's the one who was seen on the camera footage before Thalia and JJ were found in his backyard, and she's kind of like the ringleader, as you would say, in the Daybell sibling family. She believes that her father is innocent and that Lori framed him. Anyway, but Chad, like I said, is not very creative, so he's named most of these characters off of people in real life. So you'll be okay. I'll be fine. Sorry to scare you like that. Sorry to fall down the stairs. I gave him a smile to show I'd survive, and he went on his way. I sometimes grow wary of apologizing for such exploits, but I've learned to accept these gifted feet of mine. Not that I'd wish them on anyone else. But if I weren't such a klutz, I never would have been sent on a journey that changed my life and the lives of my ancestors. So being clumsy has some benefits. This kind of reads like a 4th grade book. Like I said, I'm not a good writer, so I'm not going to judge the writing too hard. But the way that he describes things is just very elementary. My adventure began innocently last summer at my home in Springville as Mom and I waited for a visiting teacher to arrive. A visiting teacher, by the way, is somebody from the LDS church who comes to check on you like sporadically, like to kind of see how you're doing. I don't know if it is only for women, like if visiting teachers only visit like women with children, or I don't know. But that's kind of what I've heard. Beth and Leah Jensen, like I said, Leah is another one of Chad's kids, are white-haired elderly siblings who live around the corner from us, and they've been our visiting teachers since I was 3 years old. Their visits always followed the same pattern, starting with the chat about the neighbors, then questions about how our family was doing. They usually close the visit with an inspiring experience from their mission together to Florida. Then Leah would often say, "Emma, I believe your endless accidents have a deeper purpose, sort of a mission of your own." She's a prophet. Come on. Just don't get yourself killed trying to complete that mission. I don't get why any person would say that to a child, but okay. That comment always bothered me. It seemed absurd to say. Also, this book has kind of fallen apart, and it doesn't look very well used. But it might just be due to age. I don't know. Anyway, my clumsiness had a high. Oh, nope. Oh, and a page just fell out. Oh my god. Okay, this is wild. That comment always bothered me. It seemed absurd to say. My clumsiness had a higher purpose, but I could shake off Leah's abrasiveness because she was my favorite of the sisters. Both are wonderful people, but Leah draws people to her like a magnet, while Beth often gets too bogged down by mundane tasks to let anyone get close to her. When I first read in the Bible about the sisters Mary and Martha, who were Jesus' friends, I immediately thought of Leah and Beth. Leah is like Mary, who took the time to listen to the Master, while Beth lives as Martha did. She does necessary chores and church callings, but rarely devotes times to the Savior or to savoring spiritual things. When they taught classes at Springville High during their young years, the students nicknamed them the Fire and Ice Sisters. Leah fired up the students, but Beth never warmed up to anyone. I also want to note, if you're one of those people who's like, this is going to take forever, I am going to recommend a YouTube channel to you. Wordwise, she's an actual author who also edits books and does a very nice, comprehensive, well thought out video on all of Chad's books. So if you're one of those people who's like, just get to the point, I recommend going to her channel. Anyway, I just thought that's the reason why I found out about these books, and I love her videos. Leah had taken me under her wing over the years. We would sit together at church, and we worked together planting flowers or raking leaves in her yard. It was during these times she became my own Dear Abby. I think that's a book or something like that. I'd ask her questions about life and the church, and she would share her opinions on the subjects. For example, when Mom and Dad told me I couldn't date until I was 16, I really resented it. Okay, Emma. But a 10-minute chat with Leah the next day helped it make sense. It was during one of those self-leaf raking sessions that I asked Leah a question I'd been pondering. Okay. Anyway, Leah, I've seen your family pictures on the wall. You were an attractive young woman. Like I said, Chad does not know how people act and definitely doesn't know how children talk. I would never tell one of my elders that she was an attractive young woman. Didn't you ever have an opportunity to get married? She laughed and said, I've only saved my most flattering pictures. I've suffered through plenty of bad hair days. Then a sorrowful look came into her eyes. She leaned her rake against a tree and pointed down the street to a 2-story house. Yes, I had my opportunity. As a teenager, I went steady with Harold Milton, who lived in that house. We've been childhood friends. But in high school, a romance began to blossom between us. Her eyes twinkled with the memory. We planned to marry after we graduated, but the attack on Pearl Harbor turned our world upside down. I feared Harold would have to go to war, and sure enough, he was drafted into the army soon after graduation. He wanted us to get married before he went overseas, but I didn't want to rush into anything. I felt the Lord would watch over Harold and bring him safely home. Oh no, is Harold gonna die? Let's find out. Leah paused and gave me a small, sad smile. Let's go sit on the porch. I haven't told this story in a long time, and it's taking a lot out of me. She's been talking for 5 minutes. Okay, anyway. I took her arm and we settled on the top steps. Both our families urged us to get married, but I was only 18, the same age as you, she said. I was so confused. Harold begged me to go to the Justice of the Peace with him that final night, but I refused one day. So he finally knelt before me and pulled out a ring. Because, as we know, the most romantic thing a man can do is not take no for an answer. He said, Leah, please promise me you'll marry me the day I get home. I agreed and slipped the ring on my finger. 2 months later, I found out that my soldier boy had been killed in Europe when a grenade landed in his foxhole. I wrapped my arms around her as we fought back tears. Like I said, Chad does this thing. You know how they say, like, show not tell? Or, yeah. I'm not getting any sort of emotion from this book. And anyway, when Leah held up her left hand, and I noticed a plain silver band around her withered ring finger. I've kept my promise to Harold, and I hope he gets his part. He keeps his part of the deal. So she's, I guess, waiting for like the celestial, them to be moved to the celestial kingdom. But like, obviously, if she's also, she is LDS because she is her visiting teacher. I don't think you get to see each other in heaven unless you're sealed to each other. If you're LDS and I said that wrong, I'm sorry. Let's sit back. All right. The Jensen sisters had visited us on the 3rd day of the month at 4, rain or shine. They didn't like me to visit too early in the month on the rare chance that they'd miss some important news in our lives, but they also didn't want to procrastinate until the end of the month, so the 3rd Tuesday worked for all of us. Tuesday at 4, if you're in high school, aren't you in school? Like, we used to get out like 4 or 5. Anyway, so on July 20th at 4:10 p.m., Mom and I sat on the couch. Surprised the Jensen sisters had missed their first appointment in nearly 200 months. Are they dead too? How many people have died before the first page? So on July 20th at 4:10 p.m., okay, we looked uneasily at each other as we heard sirens approaching our block. And a sense of foreboding settled on us. Then the phone rang, and I jumped up to answer it. Hello. I could hear Beth crying at the other end of the line. Beth, talk to me. What's wrong? Emma, we won't be visiting you today. What happened? We heard the sirens. Leah has collapsed. I think she had a heart attack. So somebody died. Leah. Okay. So he's already killed off one of his daughters, aka Leah. We'll be right there. I slammed the phone down and rushed to the door. It might also be the binding. Not the binding, sorry. It might also be the cover, because it kind of pulls every time I, like, open it, it pulls up. Um, but these are very badly bound. It's almost like, if you're one of those people who, like, works with kids' books, like, if you're a librarian or, like, a teacher, you'll know that, like, there's certain companies that have, like, the worst binding. Scholastic is one of them. I might put this one on the list. Cedar Fort, what are you doing? I mean, like I said, this book was written in 1999. I don't know when it was published, but we're already missing. We lost 2 pages. All right. We'll be right there. I slammed the phone down and rushed out the door with Mom right behind me. We ran around the corner and saw paramedics at the porch working feverishly to keep Leah alive, but their efforts soon slowed, then stopped completely. Mom went inside to comfort Beth, and I crumpled to the ground in tears, shocked to lose a dear friend. Also, again, okay, listen. I'm one of the worst people to, like, watch movies with, because I will, like, look at the logistics of things and I'm like, that's not how things work. Maybe it's like an autistic thing, I don't know. But sorry. All right. Somebody walked in. Um I don't think the first thing you would do, or thing you would do, if somebody was working on your sister who just had a heart attack, I would not answer the phone. Also, I would not say, "We're not gonna make it to our appointment." Who would do that? Like, I was thinking that Leah had already had the heart attack. It was, like, not being worked on. Like, I don't know, it was ridiculous. Anyway, um, so Leah passed away, RIP Leah. I'm sorry. Also, if I sit back, should I don't wanna. Okay. Alright. Sorry. Alright, okay, so Beth told us as Leah shut the front door to leave for a visit, she slumped silently on the porch. Beth hadn't been able to find a pulse. By the time she finally returned to Leah's side after calling 911, Leah had likely been reunited with friends and family in the heavenly courts above. Leah's funeral service was uplifting. That's the first sentence of chapter 2. But I had difficulty controlling my emotions. I had agreed to sing a vocal solo, but I couldn't stop crying during my rehearsal, so I took myself off the program. The talks were beautiful, but they kept me in tears, especially when Dad spoke of the impact Leah had made on our family. But by the time we drove from the church to the Springville Evergreen Cemetery for Leah's burial, I had settled into a somber, accepting mood. I knew Leah would die someday, but this was too sudden. She had been my anchor this past year, as I'd lost then slowly regained my self-esteem. Our little family of 4 had always been very close, and life had gone smoothly for years. Dad is a well-respected electrician, and Mom is a full-time homemaker. They're nice, friendly people, sorry, but certainly not famous. Why would you say that about your parents? Like, most parents are not famous. Anyway, as the oldest child, I'm sure I'd be the one to bring glory to my family. That's like I said, I wish I was a psychologist, because I feel like that's a weird thing to say, and just the fact that, like, people need to be famous to be successful. I mean, he for sure is famous in some circles. But yeah, Doug was merely my messy younger brother. Okay, sorry. As the oldest child, I felt I'd be sure the one to bring glory to my family. And Chad, just to mention, Chad was the oldest child in his family as well. So maybe this is him in character form, although he's a woman. Okay. Doug was merely my messy younger brother who spent all his time playing sports and wouldn't amount to much. Then last year, Doug ruined my big plans. As a sophomore, Doug was named the starting third baseman of the Springville High baseball team. How dare he? He did fine, but he wasn't a star. Then in the game, to decide the regional title, the Spanish Fork Dons had the bases loaded and won out in the final inning with Springville ahead by a run. Don't know what that means. Spanish Works' best player smashed a line drive down the third base, and it appeared the Dons were going to win. But Doug snagged the ball in the tip of his glove and quickly tagged the base runner. Double play. Springville had won the title. Like I said, Doug ruined her life by becoming a baseball player who is now very successful. And I don't know why I'm like blurry. Maybe I need to bring my camera closer. We're only on page 5. It's going to be a long video. Anyway, I think, I don't know, if we get to where it's like, okay, I'm tired of reading, we'll do it in like 2 parts. It's a very short book. It's only like 140 pages. A photographer caught Doug's catch on film, and the Daily Herald ran the photo across the top of its sports section with the headline, Dalton's defense team defeats Dons. Or Dalton's defense defeats Dons. The sports writer nicknamed him Doug Double D Dalton. And we'd had the local celebrity in our home ever since. Double D's. Don't mess with the D. The double D. Doug's confidence soared, and he developed into Springville's best athlete. I almost feel like maybe he's talking about like somebody else in his family, maybe like one of his other siblings. I don't know. It just sounds like a personal issue. Okay. During his junior year, he was a star running back in football and then dazzled everyone as a baseball guard. Finally, he capped off his past baseball season by leading Springville to the state title. Believe me, I'm not bragging. We know you're not. We know that you're bitter. I just wanted to share why I've had a drop in self-confidence lately. Listen, I'm the oldest in my family. And yes, when I was in high school, I'm sure I was insecure. I'm sure that, like many siblings, you think your life is unfair compared to your other siblings. And, especially being the oldest one, it's, the saying, like, I walked so you can run, that kind of thing. But I've never had a drop in self-confidence because my other sibling was, like, more successful in me in some ways. I'm so bad at sports. And I'm super clumsy. I've always been bad at sports. My siblings have played sports. I don't think I've ever had a drop in self-confidence. You're the oldest child in your family. Why would you feel inferior to your younger siblings? That's weird. Anyway, it is undeniable that I'm athletically inferior to him. We've had the same genes, yet he's so athletic and I'm so clumsy. Thankfully, my parents do their best not to show favoritism. When this was an article in the newspaper about Doug, Mom made sure she clipped out the honor roll and underlined my name in red ink before posting both clippings on the fridge. It seems like... Anyway, okay. But she gave that one up when she realized that Doug was in the paper at least once a week, while the honor roll came out only 4 times a year. Finally, she just kept a scrapbook for Doug and hid it so I wouldn't feel bad. I don't think parents would do that. Anyway, I struggled a bit becoming Double D's big sister. His success wouldn't have bothered me so much, except it never went to his head. If he'd been it never went to his head. If he'd been cocky, I could have still felt superior, but other than his not so hot grade point average, he's great. He's humble, handsome, and kind to everyone. Because let's remember, in the LDS faith, in a lot of evangelical Christian religions, you become successful by being the one who talks the loudest, right? You see those televangelists, those church, mega church priests, or not priests, sorry, preachers. They're screaming, they're yelling, they're trying to get attention, they're trying to be the most like charismatic one, right? But in the LDS faith, it's a little bit different. You're seen as more pious, more godly, if you speak in a soft, humble voice. And this is where we get this is where you have to realize that being humble would make you feel more insecure than being cocky in this situation. Why did I have to be the flawed child? Nobody said you were flawed. Come on. I hope great things awaited me, yet I had a different idea what these things could be compared to Doug's success. But when I was at my lowest, Leah was at her best. You seem a little down, dear, Leah would say. Too many boys to choose from? No, I just feel invisible at school and at home. It's always Doug this and Doug that. I'm sick of it. There's more to life than Doug. You've said it, she replied curtly. I stared at her, glad she agreed. Sports and popularity may seem important, but they don't mean much in the long run, she said. Tell that to LeBron James. Anyway, Emma, you've gotten a mission to perform, and that will someday mean more than all of Doug's hits, touchdowns, and baskets combined. There was that mission talk again. Despite my own doubts about that mission, her assurances helped me keep my head up, even when the rest of the world thought I was just an airhead. You can't, okay, listen, Chad, you can't be an airhead and be a clumsy loser at the same time. Okay, if you're an airhead, usually the stereotype goes that you're popular, right? You're dumb, but like you're pretty. You have something else to give, and that's why you can be an airhead. You can't be an airhead, but also claim to be a nerd. I don't know. Anyway, let's take a drink. And we're not gonna make this a drinking game because I think that would be horrible. Yeah, this is where the squishmallow comes in. I'm like, I don't know, my hypermobility is showing, and I'm like, I need my hands to not be in the air. Sorry, I don't know this guy's name. The squishmallow. Don't they all have names? I need him to like prop up my book. His little tail. Okay. All right. There was that mission talk again. Despite my own doubts about that mission, her assurances helped me keep my head up. Even when the rest of the world thought I was just an airhead. Oh yeah, we just talked about that. Okay. My light brown hair, blue eyes, and gangly frame did fit the mold, especially when combined with my clumsiness, but it just wasn't true. I did well in school and seminary, and I knew that somewhere there's a wonderful prince waiting for me that would understand his sometimes spacey princess. Like I said, I don't think Chad knows what spacey is. You guys- These trees could tell. Dad was one of the pallbearers, and he took his place near the hearse. I don't know why that's flickering. I think it's my internet. Sorry about that. Okay. Hopefully it goes back up. That's weird. Dad was one of the pallbearers, and he took his place near the hearse. Mom and I walked through the grove and stood near the gravesite. I looked at the many faces in the large crowd, both young and old. I suddenly realized what an impact this small, frail woman had made on so many lives besides just mine. Following the gravesite service and dedicatory prayer, I approached Beth, who was sitting in the chair near the casket. I offered her my sympathies and gave her a hug. Please come visit me, she said. I hope we can become better friends. I will, Beth. No one knows your flower gardens better than me. We tried to smile, but our hearts were breaking. I gave her a kiss on the cheek. Then I removed a red rose from a flower arrangement and placed it on Leah's casket. You stole a flower from somebody else's flower arrangement and put it on their casket? That is in poor taste. Anyway, I ran my finger along the casket's polished wood lid. Leah, thank you for everything you've taught me, I said softly. I won't let you down. As the crowd began to disperse, I walked over to my parents, sorry. I gave Dad a hug, and he said, Emma, we are going back to the church to help with the luncheon. Do you want to come with us? Oh, I think I'll just wander around the cemetery for a few minutes. There's the Chad we know. I said, I'll find a ride to the church. I watched them get into the car and drive away. Then I began a leisurely walk through the older part of the cemetery. I loved reading the dates on the headstones and imagining the lives those peoples have led. I noticed 2 stones side by side. I was one of those, like, weird kids who were like, "I love cemeteries." I do like cemeteries. I like, when I travel, I like to visit them. Um, but I think maybe when I was in high school, I was trying to be edgy, but I don't know. I just think they're cool. Um, and I do the same thing, I guess. One person had only lived a day, while the other had lived to be 103. It reminded me of one of Leah's favorite sayings. All that matters is that we earn our eternal reward since we all end up 6 feet underground. The memory brought me to tears in my eyes as I realized how true that statement was today. Leah wasn't known outside the city except for by foremost students, but she had earned her reward. Another drink. I walked down the slope, emerging from the cemetery's oldest sections, and entered an area that was special to me. Despite the lack of big headstones or ancient trees, I strolled over to the small brownish granite headstone where my great-grandpa Keith Dalton was buried. Keith, by the way, so again, this person is a Dalton. Like I said, Chad is not very creative, so he had to use a D last name. Keith Daybell is actually one of Chad's, I believe, his great grandfather. So he used all the names of his like former ancestors. Um, he had been killed in logging accident many years ago, which did also happen in Chad's real life. But stories of his courage while confined in the World War II prison camps were legendary. His courage was likely inherited from Finity Dalton. Finity is also another one of Chad's family members, who led his family from England to Utah in 1864. That pioneer family had loved horses and the outdoors, and those feelings had been passed down through the family line. Although I am more of a bookworm than a rodeo queen, because again, she's an airhead that likes to read, I have always looked forward to the Dalton family parties, which were guaranteed to be loud, joke-filled, and wonderful. There was always a strong unity there. You knew these people cared about you and would be there for you. I bent down and brushed away some grass clippings from the face of the headstone. I wondered where Grandpa Keith was satisfied with the direction of my life. After graduating from high school in May, I had a lot of extra time on my hands as I waited to start college at BYU in the fall. For the very first weeks of the summer, my friends Angie, Brandy, and I celebrated our supposed adulthood by visiting the various dance clubs in Provo. I love to dance partly because it's the only time I'm sure-footed. By the way, when I was reading When the Moon Turns to Blood, they talked about how Chad, he was like, shy and whatever until he got on the dance floor. So, like I said, he has a thing about dancing. You'll come to realize, I'm sure-footed. But country line dancing got too repetitious, and my friends rejected my suggestion to attend the church young single adult dances. They felt those dances weren't exciting enough, although I enjoyed them. While we had started going down to these dance clubs, I felt Mr. Right would emerge from the dark shadows and swirling strobe lights, sweeping me off my feet and eventually taking me to the temple. But my hopes were fading fast. I thought she was in high school. I don't know. Okay. Maybe she's not. Maybe she's older. Or I think she's in college. Oh, yeah. Isn't she at BYU? Yeah. So she's like not even out of college yet. One Saturday night, we found ourselves at a noisy Orem dance club. On this night, the dance beat was getting to give me a pounding headache, and the closest thing to Mr. Right had been a guy named Andre. Andre's only flaws were that he was 3 inches shorter than I, and he felt the need to slow dance no matter how fast the songs beat. My friends noticed Andre's interest in me, and Brandy teased, saying, "I think someone really likes you." We looked into Andre's direction and found him staring at me. He raised his eyebrows and smiled casually. I turned away, and Brandy said, "Go for it. He looks nice." Andre quickly approached and asked me to dance a 4th time, so I decided to get to know him. Because, like I said, nothing more romantic than a guy who will not take more no for an answer. I leaned towards his ear and shouted, "Andre, where do you work?" He said, "I'm in the process of switching jobs," he shouted back to me to be heard from the music. He shouted back to be heard above the music, sorry. In other words, he probably got fired last week. That's a weird assumption. but okay. This guy was really looking swell. I thought I'd test him a little and let him know where I was coming from, so I asked, "What do you do on weekends other than dance? Would you like to come to the church with me tomorrow?" "Oh, I haven't been to the church in a while, but I'd like to go again soon. Why don't we go back to my apartment and discuss how to spend Sunday?" He pulled me tightly against him, and his hand slid from my back to my hips. "Not so fast, jerk." I immediately pushed him away and somehow resisted the urge to punch him in the face. "You stand your ground, Emma. Come on. This isn't going to work, Andre." That's a weird thing to say. "By the way, it's time you learn how to fast dance for a change." Andre reached out to grab my arm, but I gave him the meanest glare. I think every single page is going to fall out of this book. And he moved back into the crowd. It's fun. It's like a little, like, if I needed the book to go, like, I can take these. Okay. And he moved into the crowd. I walked over to Angie. "That guy needs to learn some manners." Angie rolled his eyes. "Emma, you're too picky. Have a little fun." And this guy just like, okay. Anyway, I'd rather be too picky than not be picky enough. Like I said, you stand your ground, Emma. I was surprised Angie didn't support my feelings. "I'm going home." Like I said, I think if my friend said that to me, I'd probably go home too. Angie, hopefully I didn't click mute. Okay. Angie had driven us there, and I knew neither nor Brandon wanted to leave the dance. So I told him I knew neither she nor Brandy wanted to leave the dance. So I told him I'd take the bus home. I left the building and waited for the UTA bus stop for several minutes. I don't think, okay. Finally, the bus arrived. As I traveled home on the nearly empty bus, I cussed myself out. I don't think she really did. Why was I spending each Friday night? I bet she said, like, shoot. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's anyway. I I'm no stranger to Christian cussing. While I was spending my night each Friday and Saturday night in this pointless routine, my friends seemed to be headed in a different direction than I wanted to go, and I was uncomfortable with their new thrill-seeking attitudes. Fun and excitement were too high of a priority in their lives. Just 6 months ago, we spent the night at Angie's house discussing our hopes of marrying a worthy man in the temple for time and all eternity. Now my friends rarely mention church, and maybe I'd allowed my ideals to slip a little too. I admitted to myself that I hadn't seen any men at the dances who had temple marriage on their minds. I I find it interesting that Chad is using a college-aged girl as his first character. Um, I often, or not often, sorry. I've been like saying I often a lot. I don't know why. Um, but I've thought about writing a book before, and usually when you think of like the main character, and maybe this is just me, I don't know anything about writing a book. Um, I always think about like the best person you can understand most of the time is yourself, and envision myself in these characters. It's just interesting that Chad made his first character a college age, ready for marriage girl. That's just like I said, I wish I was a psychologist so I would know like if that means anything, if anything at all. Let's continue. That was the last dance I attended with my friends. They invited me over a few more times, but I never went, and the phone calls soon stopped. I realized I really didn't miss the chances or my friends either. We've been inseparable in high school, but our time together had always been centered around homework and school activities. Now our mutual love of dancing wasn't enough to keep the bonds of friendship strong. Dancing can keep anyone together. Anyway, now I feel lonely, but liberated, ready to branch out and find new challenges. Listen, in this sense, I identify with Emma a little bit, I am a strong supporter of if you don't feel comfortable or like wanted in your friends, it's better to be alone than be in like relationships that don't fulfill you. Anyway, um, but maybe not just because my friends want to go dancing all the time. I don't know. but then again. So my first challenge step into real life was to take a job at Springville's Hoagie Yogi sandwich shop. Quite a big challenge, right? The job itself was a bit stressful as I tried to keep the customers happy, but I finally received a paycheck I felt made progress in life. I can identify a lot with like being a college kid and being like, my life is over. What am I doing with my life? I'm not successful. And I'm like, now that I think about it, I'm like, you were in college. That's what your job is. I usually worked from noon to 8 p.m., so I had a lot of free time in the morning. Too much free time. I felt antsy. I was waking up at 12 p.m. I'll be honest. I did a few chores each day and even watched a soap opera for a week, but that just added to the tension. I could feel the void in my life, but how was I supposed to fill it? One night, we gathered around the table playing Scrabble and eating popcorn. I mentioned to Dad that I was feeling restless. He sat there thoughtfully for a moment, then went to the bookshelf and plopped a big paperback book onto my table. I stared at the cover. The Book of Mormon? Get real, Dad. I'm not that bored. Dad looked a little hurt, and I backpedaled a little. I mean, I read it in ninth grade for seminary, and I didn't understand much of it. You've grown a lot since then, he said. I think you'll find it refreshing. It sure beats the plot lines of General Hospital. I had no argument there. Doug had been listening to the conversation, and he said, I'll be studying the Book of Mormon in seminary this year. Because, like I said, he's humble. Just checking the time. All right. So, why don't I get a jump on the rest of the class? We all know I need any advantage I can get. He gave me a playful grin. Let's have a reading contest, Emma. This one doesn't involve any type of coordination, so you've got a chance. I picked up the book and nearly hurled it at him. Imagine if she hurled the Book of Mormon at her brother. But then we all started laughing. He'd won me over. I probably could have brushed off Dad, but I couldn't resist Doug's challenge. You've got a deal, little brother. I always think it's weird when people in books call I know sometimes you know, you can call yourself bro or whatever, brother in that Hulk Hogan kind of voice, but I never be little brother. I don't know. If I win, you'll do the dishes for a month. And if I win, this is Doug talking, and if I win, you'll have to go on a date with Billy. The thought of dating his ape-like best friend was revolting, but I provided a strong incentive. Emma, do you listen to Girl in Red? It's a deal. Prepare to lose. I took a chapter or two to get used to the book's writing style, but by the time Nephi cut off Laban's head in the 4th chapter, remember those two people in Lori's trial? I was hooked on the story. It would make a great movie, although all the violence would bring at least a PG-13 rating. Anyway, I figured it would take a few months to read all the way through the Book of Mormon. But in just 3 weeks, we were both nearly done. How long is the Book of Mormon? I've been reading it for up to 2 hours each day, and Doug fell way behind. But then he had to play in a baseball tournament in St. George, and he read nearly half the book during the drive. Dad questioned us a few days on what we've been reading, just to make sure we weren't skipping pages. Doug enjoyed the wars and stories about as Ammon cutting off the arms of the Lamanites, while I found myself noticing themes such as how nice guys don't always finish last. Is she a femcel? I'm getting femcel vibes. Okay. Time after time in the Book of Mormon, the righteous prevail in the end, especially when Jesus visited America after his resurrection. Like I said, I don't mean to make fun of these things. I just find it interesting that Emma believes that Jesus is going to visit America after his resurrection. Maybe he will, because he's going to be like, oh, this place needs help. Anyway, I loved the way he treated the people and blessed them. Now listen, so you can't really notice, but he is capitalized every time that they talk about Jesus and God. So I used to be religious in college. I also studied religion, and so I did a paper for my religious studies class, and I because I had grown up using he in the capitalized form for God or Jesus, I used to do that in my religious studies papers. Like these are and these are not they're not talking about belief. It's talking about we used to do biblical classes and talk about history and concepts and stuff. So when I would say he about God and capitalize the H, I would always get reprimanded because they said I wasn't supposed to do that. And I really struggled with that. I was just like, how am I not supposed to capitalize God's name? Like that's just weird. Um and I was also weird that felt weird that my Christian religious studies teachers were like, this is not right. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like you're supposed to capitalize the name, or you're supposed to capitalize he when you're referring to God. Anyway, but this is what Chad does in his books. I've I've since not felt the urge to do that. I don't, because I don't believe in that anymore. But this is a 30-year-old man, 30-something-year-old man writing he referring to Jesus. But then again, I recognize this is a religious book, so and they're talking about the Book of Mormon, so I'll let it slide. Just a note though. It gave me hopes that a little perseverance and towing the line, maybe someday the Savior would allow me in his kingdom too. As we neared the end of the book, Doug and I decided to finish together. We were both happy. He didn't have to do dishes, and I could avoid his pal Billy. How did they finish the book together? Do they read it in unison? Like those twins? Have you seen those twins on that video? They're trying to talk the same. Anyway, we read the last two chapters as a family, and I could feel the spirit strongly. As a family, and I could feel the spirit strongly. For the first time in life, I began to understand what the gospel of Jesus Christ was about, helping families return to the Heavenly Father. I finally felt I had a testimony of the gospel, and just in time, I would rely on that testimony many times in the challenging months ahead. That's some not foreboding. What is it for? Something. Anyway, as we finished reading, I closed my book and said, "The Book of Mormon is just one big family history album. Some of the family made it, and some didn't." Sounds a lot like our family, Dad said. What do you mean? Doug asked. Weren't all our ancestors members of the church? Sorry to burst your bubble, Doug. We came down in a bubble, Doug. It reminds me of that. Okay. But our genes are a mix of royalty, average folk, and downright scoundrels. Aren't we all? Doug and I stared at him in astonishment. We could understand the royalty part, but scoundrels? How are they royalty? Mom went on the main that's the part that you're you can't understand. Anyway, Mom went to the main closet in our living room. You two have never been very interested in our family history, she said. I guess we'll have to reveal our family's darkest secret to spark your interest. He brought over a hefty stack of books and folders and placed them on the floor in front of us. I'd heard Mom and Dad talk about these records before, but I'd been too caught up in school and other activities to really care. We had a lot of information on most of our family tree, but this Cooper family on my mom's side was a real stickler. Mom was a convert to the church, and we hardly had any information. The line stops at Grandpa Thomas Cooper Jr. Well, if he's a junior, do you know his dad is also named... I know his dad is also named Thomas, don't you? That's right. We followed Thomas Jr.'s parents and siblings living in Rhode Island in the 1850 U.S. Census. Mom said, but all the census tells us is they were from England. Plus, Thomas Jr. vanished around 1865. I've had a suspicion that he was in trouble with the law, and I wouldn't doubt he rotted away in prison or got killed in a shootout. That caught Doug's attention. Cool. We got our own Butch Cassidy. Too bad he wasn't famous, because it would have made the search easier. We searched through many English records, but in the 19th century England, the name Thomas Cooper was as common as Bill Smith is today. So finding the right Thomas has been like trying to find a slightly overweight friend near a hat and sunglasses wearing a hat and sunglasses at BYU football game. Chad, are you speaking about yourself? I have nothing against overweight people or fat people or anybody who struggles with their weight or, let me say this differently. My doctor often tells me how much weight I need to lose because I'm overweight. Um, so I'm not saying this like, "Oh, Chad, you're overweight," like, blah blah blah. Like that has nothing to do with what he's worth. But if you're fat phobic and most of your jokes are like going after weight of people, I will call you fat as a joke. Like literally, like when people like I remember like my friends would who were like skinnier than me in high school, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm so fat." I would just agree with them because I'm like, I'm not gonna give you the satisfaction. I'd be like, "No, you're not fat." Like, first of all, being fat is not bad. Um, but I think you'll notice that a prevalent theme in Chad's books is that he likes to make fat jokes, which is ironic considering what he looks like when he's committing these crimes. And like I said, I'm not making fun of him because he's fat. I'm making fun of him because he makes fun of fat people, but he was fat himself, and that's weird. Um, Not weird that he's fat. Weird that he's making fun of fat people. Let me continue. All right. Um, we all laughed, knowing he just described a good portion of the fans in Cougar Stadium on game day. In other words, we've come across many guys that look like Thomas, but we never find him till we know his seat number. I don't think he had to explain the joke, but okay. To be honest, it might take a miracle to ever find his information, Mom said. I feel Grandpa and Grandma Cooper are busy in the spirit world teaching the gospel to our ancestors, preparing them to accept the ordinances of the temple. But their students can pass their final exams and leave spirit prison for paradise until we find our records and do their temple work. If I go to heaven and have to do more work, I will. I think I was in a bad place, but okay. Also, by the way, Spirit Prison is if I'm not mistaken, Spirit Prison is a place you go. It's almost like purgatory. It's not hell. Um, but, sorry. Um, if you're not a temple goer, you're not sealed in the temple, which is every single ancestor before Joseph Smith. Um, the reason why your family does family history is to get you out of this thing called Spirit Prison. Which you can only do if your family baptizes you or proxy baptizes you into the Mormon church in the temple. And if you're married, you have to get proxy married in the Mormon temple. Sorry. Um, so that's what they're talking about. All their ancestors are in spirit prison until they can find their names and baptize them on behalf of them. They laughed at me. Okay, sorry. Wow, I never even thought of that before, I said. I figured our ancestors are just playing harps and clouds until the second coming. They laughed at me, but I wasn't joking. That conversation opened up my mind, and I spent a lot of time the following weeks reading through those records, getting to know the talented, spiritual, strange, and psychotic ancestors who had preceded me, and who were thus part of me. Also, the importance of temple work began to sink in. Going to the temple was no longer just the one Tuesday a month when Mom and Dad were gone for 3 hours. I now saw its purpose to help those who had died without hearing the gospel, made covenants with Heavenly Father, and achieve eternal life. My thoughts were interrupted by the noise of an approaching train on the tracks below the cemetery. I saw an older gentleman starting up a ride lawnmower off to the right. The funeral must be over. How long have I been standing there? Sorry, I thought something had happened. Okay. The funeral must be over. How long had I been standing there? I looked back towards Leah's graveside, and the only few people remain. If I were going to get a ride back to the church, I needed to start back quickly. But I took a moment and said a silent prayer. Heavenly Father, please open a way for us to find out about the Coopers, I prayed. I know any tidbit of information, such as where they lived in England, will lead us to several more generations of my ancestors, allowing me to be an instrument in my hands. Allow me to be an instrument in thy hands. I'm a bad reader out louder. Um, I closed the prayer, then began walking briskly back across the grass to the gravesite. The hot July sun was beating down, so I weaved my way through various headstones, trying to stand in the shade. I noticed a small gray headstone with a cute little lamb carved in its top, and I took a moment to inspect the stone more closely. Honk, honk! The blast of a train horn startled me and sent me stumbling forward. I caught my toe in the grass and slammed head first into that cute lamb. I lay dazed, trying to think clearly over the road of the approaching train. Then everything went dark as my head slipped from the headstone onto the ground. I really want to know, like, the layout of the cemetery. I mean, I'm assuming that Chad, um, like, he bases his everything off of real life, so I think this is a real cemetery, but like I'm trying to think of like the logistics of this, but again, I'm also one of those people that like when I read, like when people have a setting and they describe what things look like I completely get them wrong. This is also like the same thing with people. Like if they like describe people, I'm like, I don't know what they look like. So um maybe I'm just like maybe I missed something. I also don't really get much like okay, sorry. Sitting back is getting me sleepy, but if I sit up, my back hurts. But yeah, maybe that's why like maybe I missed a few details, but who knows. All right, so we're at chapter 3 and we're already an hour in, so I don't think I'll finish this tonight. I thought I could read this like pretty fast. It's getting a little this might have to be a few parts. But yeah. Let's take a little break. How's everybody doing? I mean, so far um I don't know. It's just like some of these parts are like I feel like I've been reading for more than an hour. Well, like technically I have, but it's just like I forgot we were at the funeral when they were describing like the family talking about the family history and like the whole like Book of Mormon thing. Um I I almost forgot that they were at a funeral. Like I didn't know this was a flashback, but I guess that makes sense. Let's hydrate ourselves. Also, when I read out loud, my like mouth gets super dry, like more than if I talk. Don't know the logistics behind that. All right, chapter 3. Gritty sand pressed into my cheek as I lay motionless on the ground. I felt movement near my head, and I opened my eyes to find myself staring in the face of a mouse that was pawing gently at my hair. I don't think mice like people. I jerked my head up, and the mouse scurried away. Then I noticed the overpowering silence. I expected to hear the shrill train whistle that had startled me, or at least the whirring blades of a nearby lawnmower, but there wasn't a sound. Was I dead? No. I could feel the throbbing bump on my head where I crashed into the headstone, and I could taste sand on my lips. I was surrounded by sagebrush, weeds, and tall grass. This sure was an evergreen cemetery. Or was it? I was in a grove of juniper trees, and in the distance to the east I could see Maple Mountain, as majestic as ever. I could see Utah Lake in the valley below, and the sun was still blazing down on me. This was the same scene I'd admired just moments before at Grandpa Keith's grave. But as I scanned the area for headstones or roads, there was no hint the ground had ever been disturbed. The land was just as I had always known it, just lacking modern developments. No cemetery, No railroad tracks and no other human beings. Railroads are not that modern, but okay. Could I possibly have knocked myself into a previous time? How do you like infer that? Like like I would just be like, I think I might have lost my memory and like walk somewhere else. Like I would never be like, did I just get knocked back in time? From the looks of things, maybe the Mormon pioneers hadn't arrived in Utah Valley yet. Chad, nobody would think that. I mean, maybe if you hit your head, you wouldn't be thinking straight, but you wouldn't be like, oh, I don't recognize anything. Did I just go back in time? I don't think the Mormon pioneers have, I don't think my ancestors have pioneered Utah Valley yet. I don't, okay. Also, it's not called pioneering, it's called colonizing. But we'll have the conversation later. Dad had mentioned that Indian tribes had inhabited this part of the valley before the pioneers arrived, and I knew they'd often sold their captives into slavery and tortured them mercilessly. Panic swept through me. I thought they were talking about how the pioneers did that, but now I'm realizing he's talking about how the Native Americans did that. Okay. Panic swept through me, and any curiosity was gone. So, in those few seconds after you knocked your head, first of all, a mouse woke you up like Snow White. Um, You looked around, you didn't see the headstones, you didn't see the cemetery, or you didn't see the cemetery, you didn't see the trains or any modern amenities, you didn't hear the lawnmower. And in that like 5 seconds, you realized that maybe the Mormon pioneer, maybe you're in the past, maybe the Mormon pioneers hadn't colonized the Utah Valley yet, and that if that didn't happen, then there's probably indigenous people around, and they're going to capture you and torture you or sell you into slavery. That's your okay. Anyway, hello, is anyone out there? I shouted. Please help me. Also, if there's only indigenous people around, they wouldn't understand you, but okay. Whoosh! A hawk dived towards me from a nearby tree. What is with these animals just like wanting to interact with Emma right now? Briefly, as I decided whether I was worth attacking. Then it flapped its wings and streaked past me for a flight across the valley. My heart fluttered, and I crawled under the tree to gather my emotions. I kept telling myself that I must have given myself a concussion. Between this and Leah's funeral, my emotions were at a breaking point, and I began sobbing uncontrollably. This was insane. I sobbed so long my throat went dry. I realized I needed to find water soon, or I'd suffer a heat stroke. I wiped my eyes and looked down the slope where I knew a small stream ran. The stream's course was different, but I was still there. I cautiously began walking through the trees to the stream where a man on horseback caught my eye. He was about a quarter mile on the other side of the stream, and he was riding high speed. I could see his cowboy hat, and I ran into his direction. Mister, wait, over here. I really had no hope he would hear me, but he jerked his head in my direction. He scanned the hillside, but the horse never slowed down. I stopped in disappointment, knowing I'd never catch him, but my hope soared as I looked where he was headed. I saw a small town about a mile to the north. Smoke curled towards slowly out of several chimneys. Civilization! I was still feeling stressed out and confused, but the slight sight of something familiar calmed me. What's familiar? The smoke? I did a lot of a dance of joy and began walking towards the town. I feel like that's what the dance was. Okay. Thankfully, I had worn sandals to Leah's funeral, because high heels would have been horrendous in that sandy soil. But my denim jumper didn't offer much protection against the sagebrush and prickly weeds. I assume she's wearing this. Why would you wear this at a funeral? Why would you wear overalls at a funeral? Maybe it's like a casual funeral. I've worn jeans to a funeral before. Um, so I get it. I get that you don't have to wear all black and all that stuff, but like, why are you dressed like a 5-year-old at a funeral? Then again, it's the 90s, so maybe it's appropriate. I don't know. Um, I just wore sandals. Again, I think I've probably worn sandals at a funeral, so whatever. Anyway, um, my arms and legs were quickly covered with scratches, and the terrain was so rough and overgrown I soon abandoned walking straight to town and returned to my original plan of getting a drink in the stream. Then I'd search for the road the writer had used. The stream was only 4 feet across, but the bank was a complete mud hole. I noticed a dead tree limb sticking out of the water. I carefully walked to the end of the limb and Okay, no, I thought she was like drinking from the mud hole, and I was like, ew. Began scooping several handfuls of cool water into my mouth. I don't think if this water is like not running, I think that's not very safe, Emma. But you know, soon, like if you've played Organ Control before, you know that like you can die of dysentery like pretty easily. Um, Feeling refreshed, I prepared to leap to the other side, but the limb shifted under my feet, causing me to belly flop onto the stinking black mud on the opposite bank. Oh, okay. She just tried to jump over. I had a tough time extracting myself from several inches of slime that oozed over me, but I finally got to my feet and sloshed to a solid ground, spitting again and again to get the putrid taste out of my mouth. You're definitely going to die of dysentery in like 5 seconds. I had no way to wash myself off without making a bigger mess, so I let out a frustrated moan, wiped my hands and clumps of grass, and searched for the road. I wandered it for at least an hour, but there wasn't a trail in sight. I must have turned around. I was getting very hungry and thirsty, and the afternoon heat had turned me into a dried mud pie. I sunk to the ground and began. I thought it said I began peeing. I began peeling dried mud from my arms. Then it dawned on me that Heavenly Father understood my strange situation, even if I didn't. I bowed my head and pleaded, Father, I don't know what's happened to me, but I ask for thy guidance and protection. Please help me find someone who can safely guide me through this mess. I closed the prayer, waiting for some type of answer. A soothing feeling came over me, and I felt confident that my prayer had been heard. I sat there surrounded by weeds, pondering what to do as I heard the faint galloping of several horses. I jumped to my feet, and through the weeds to the south I could see 2 wagons coming my way. They would pass about 100 yards to my right. I ran in that direction, but stumbled several times, and it seemed certain that it would pass me. The clatter of the horses' hooves grew louder. Come on, legs, you can do it, I shouted. My legs took on new life. All they needed was a little positive thinking. I leaped around the rocks and weeds, closed the gaps between me and the wagons. Also, I am sorry because my leg hurt and I was like resting it on my desk and I realized I was shaking the camera. Sorry. I sat there surrounded by weeds, pondering what to do. When I heard the faint galloping of okay, sorry. Come on, legs, you can do it, I shouted, and my legs took on new life. I leaped across the rocks and weeds, closing the gap between me and the wagons. I shouted frantically, but the men on the wagons didn't hear me, and they quickly passed by. I had only one more chance. As the last wagon approached, I made one final leap, soaring through the tall weeds and sprawling across the dirt road into the wagon's path. Do not ever, sorry, do not ever run in front of a wagon. They will not stop. That is the dumbest thing you can ever do. The wagon's driver yanked back at the horse reins with all his might, yelling, Whoa, Duster, slow down, Nelly. I don't know if they said that back then. Like, I know that it's like based on like, okay, maybe they did. Not a historian. I cowered on the ground as the horses jerked to stop 2 feet from my head. Yeah, because you ran in front of the horses. I think it would have just been enough if you like waved them down if you were that close to them, but okay. These hooves stomped wildly in confusion, and dust swirled everywhere. The driver leaped from my wagon and grabbed the horse's vitals, probably saving my life. Yeah, because you jumped in front of the horse. Like, there's no reason why you should have done that. The wagon's other passengers, an older man, hastily dismounted and grabbed me under the arms, pulling me to safety at the edge of the road. By now, the first wagon had stopped, their worried shouts. What's going on? Yelled the other man. Did you see a rattlesnake? Are the horses all right? I don't know if they talk in that accent. I only know, like, when I think of, like, old pioneering days, I think of, like, Western accents, because I'm from Texas, but I don't think that they have that accent. I'm sorry. That's all I know, though. I'm trying to make this, like, a little bit more interesting, as in, like, try to, like, go between, like, people's voices, but I'm doing a horrible job. "Brethren, stay with your wagon," the older man called back. "We've startled a precious young creature, but we will be rolling again shortly." That's very ominous. Okay. Then he turned round to the young blonde driver. "Woo, that was a close one. Nicely done, Jake." Jake nodded. "Thanks. The horses seem fine. How's she doing?" The man turned to me. He was likely in his 60s, but he was muscular with long gray beard and twinkling blue eyes. My heart was still racing as he adjusted his suspenders and hat, and then bent down to extend his hand. "We gave each other quite a scare, didn't we?" he said with a concerned smile. "I don't believe you properly introduced my young friend. I'm President Brigham Young." Not even 3 chapters in, or at the end of third chapter, we have met Brigham Young. She just so happened to run in front of a carriage, and Brigham Young is there. This is getting juicy. Okay, sorry. I was again. I think hopefully I didn't. I was gonna sit up. Also, let's take a little. Also, like, I've lost every single page I've read is in my hands right now. This book is very badly bound, but that's good because I can. We're doing a little break. We're taking a candy break. I have to eat, like, all my Easter candy because I probably through some ASMR. Okay, thought so far. Chad does not know how humans act. And now I kind of believe that Emma really is an airhead, because only an airhead would run in front of a carriage of running horses, or wagon, sorry. And I have a feeling that Chad's really gonna be into name dropping. That was not good after the sweet tart or Sour Patch Kid. And I wonder how long it will take for Jesus to come, like, to show up in this book. Because if you've read his stories, there is a part where I think Jesus appears in several books. He makes some cameos. Let's have another one before we look, as I said, we've been talking for an hour or I've been reading for an hour and 23 minutes. Technically, like, an hour and 10 minutes, like, considering that I talked for the first 10 minutes. And we're not as far as I thought it would be. That's fine. I think this will be a 2-parter, but we're gonna try to get as long as we can. I think we'll also, like, move momentum. It's getting a little slow. Not gonna lie. Also, I'm wondering, like, if you I'm an avid reader, would you, like, log this onto your Goodreads? I don't want people to think that I'm, like, reading Chad Daybell's books for fun, but I'm one of those people who's like, I have to, like, log every single thing I'm reading because I want to get credit for it. So, but I also haven't read much. I said I was an avid reader. I take breaks. Haven't read much the past few months. So, I don't want the only book I read this month to be Chad Daybell's book, because that's what it's looking like. I've been also reading When the Moon Turns to Blood. I've read this book before, but in audiobook form, so I'm rereading it to annotate it. So, if I finish both these books this month, it'll be Chad Daybell's book, and this book, people are gonna think I'm obsessed with him. I mean, technically, I have, like, YouTube channel that talks about this case, So in a way I am. But not in a fangirl way. Let's continue. So as we saw, President Brigham Young is the one with a carriage and is not concerned why this girl just ran in front of his. I would immediately think she was like trying to commit self-exiting. Also, is he gonna like ask why she's wearing overalls? Anyway, let's continue. I'll sit up for a little bit. Sorry. This chair's like super creaky too. It just, I don't know. Anyway, I took President Young's hand and got to my feet. I tried not to stare, but the dozens of paintings and photographs I've seen of him fail to convey the powerful presence of their warm, friendly man standing before me. I'm not gonna lie, if I saw George Washington or like some sort of like founding father figure to me, I wouldn't think they had like a powerful presence. But then again, I'm thinking from a person who doesn't respect these people. I guess if I saw Brigham Young and I like respected him and saw him in pictures, maybe I would see him as a powerful presence. But I just think that maybe if I saw like, you know, like what is his name? Andrew Jackson in real life, I would just think he's like a weird old man. Anyway, what's your name, young lady? Brigham Young? Yes, that's my name. I blushed and then squeaked. I'm Emma Dalton. The confidence I felt after my prayer had evaporated. In my flustered state, I had no way to explain to a prophet of God why I had suddenly sprawled across his path, but President Young treated me with gentle kindness. You have quite a bad bump on your forehead, he said. I think that he would. So I guess, like I said, because Mormon culture, like prophets, I guess more so, like speaking like more of a humble, quiet voice. I guess I don't have to try to speak in like an accent or anything. I think he would just kind of talk like cool, calm, and collected, I guess. Ugh. Okay. You know when you get to the bottom of like an alcoholic beverage, like a cider or something, and it's just like a little bitter. It also doesn't help that I ate that Sour Patch Kid. Okay. If you're wondering why I'm still drinking, it's because I'm not a quitter. Anyway, you have quite a bad bump on your forehead. Plus, it appears you strolled through a mud hole. Let us help you, he said. Thank you. I'm very confused about everything. Brigham Young helped me into the wagon seat, and I sat between the two men as we started rolling again. I could tell they were a bit curious about me, but neither spoke for a couple minutes until Brigham broke the silence. Like I said, this woman is wearing overalls and sandals. We are traveling to Springville to meet Bishop Johnson and the saints there, Brigham said. I'm sure Sister Johnson will be able to doctor up that bump. I also hope we can find you a wash basin and some clean clothes. Oh, yes, please take me into Springville, I said unthinkingly. That's where I grew up. That brought surprised looks from the men, and I braced for their questions, but the first one took a different turn than I expected. Your last name is Dalton? Brigham asked. Several Daltons have joined the church. One family I remember well came to speak with me in Salt Lake a few years ago, and I felt impressed they should settle near Heber. His father's name is Finity. Are you related to him? Of course, she finds her family member the first 5 minutes that she comes into the past. Finity Dalton. The first Dalton in my family line had to leave England for Zion. Family to leave England for Zion. Yes, we're related, I said cautiously, although we've never met. Our conversation halted as we passed a tannery that stunk horribly. I plugged my nose, but the odor still made my eyes water. That place wasn't around during my day. I soon realized we were traveling around what would eventually become Springville's Main Street. We approached what is now 400 South and Main Street, and I noticed we would soon pass through a thick 8-foot high wall made of dried mud that stretched for blocks. When did they build this wall? I asked. It must have taken months to build. Where did you say you're from? Brigham asked. I met his eyes, but stayed silent. He watched me thoughtfully, then continued. This wall has been here for over 15 years, he said. I instructed the leaders of each settlement to build walls around the towns in the early 1850s when the Indians were really bothering us. I think it had helped keep the peace. I see that you like building walls, Brigham. I noticed the large wooden gates. Did you shut the gates each night? Jake gave me a funny look. You must have hit your head pretty hard, he said. You act like you just got here from Europe. Maybe she has, because she's wearing overalls, like I said. Brigham waved his hand at Jake, silencing him. We still close them in the part of the valley because we have had some trouble around here lately. There was a battle up the canyon at Little Diamond 2 summers ago, and the men from both sides were killed. Bad feelings still linger even now, but when Indians come in peace, we gladly share our food. Yeah, every winter a group of Indians set up camp in that juniper grove as we pass, Jake said. Their young braves like to harass people traveling this road. This sent a chill up my spine. I noticed the guns resting behind the seat and realized he was serious. Thank goodness it was summer when I ended up in that grove. Sort of take a shot every time Chad Daybell says something that's slightly racist. We're just gonna eat a Sour Patch Kid. I'm gonna probably eat this whole bag by the time I'm done. Okay. People began streaming out of the gate, shouting, "Hello, President!" and waved excitedly. Brigham took off his hat and used it to wave to people. He knew many people by name, and he'd holler out to them, asking how their crops were doing, and if they'd build their barn yet, and so on. We passed through the city gate and were greeted resoundingly by boom ba, boom ba, boom ba of a bass drum. The drummer stepped into the street ahead of us, leading a brass band. So did they know that he was coming and they just waited for him? Or does he have a PR person arrives a few days beforehand and they're like, listen, Brigham's coming to town. The band struck up a rousing tune and we became part of an impromptu parade. I suppose the writer I'd seen earlier had left the residents know that President Young was soon arrived. Maybe I just need to shut my mouth and finish the paragraph. I leaned over to Jake. Is this how it is in every town? If they know we're coming, we'd always get a grand greeting, he said. Everyone loves President Young, and he loves to visit with the saints. He visits most town only once or twice a year, if at all. So his arrivals always create a holiday. I traveled down the Springville Main Street 1,000 times, but it never enchanted me as I did this day. The narrow dirt road we had traveled on widened into a dusty street. There was no sidewalk or street lights, and the hard-packed dirt had unfamiliar buildings along each side. But I knew I was home. Those were the same mountains towering above us. I smiled as we passed the future location of Hoagie Yogi. A small farmhouse and corral occupied the site. I wouldn't be working tonight. Yeah, I don't think you will. Anyway. I watched in I watched in wonder as dozens of little children joined the parade, walking and skipping alongside the wagon. Some with shoes, some barefooted. Jake slowed the wagon to a crawl, and some of his children handed Brigham handfuls of wildflowers or polished rocks. When his hands were full, Brigham handed the items to me. I want each child who greets me to feel to feel my love for them, he said. I hope they grow up, they'll remember the times like these when they are deciding for themselves if this gospel is of God. And believe me, Emma, this work is of God. He stuck a few more rocks in my hand, then turned to greet more children. Nothing says the gospel of God like handing somebody a rock. I watched Brigham work the crowd. Even with his children demanding his attention, he made eye contact with as many adults as he could. He knew this was a big day for them, too. These people had sacrificed nearly everything for the gospel, and seeing the prophet meant a great deal to them. Receiving a wave of greeting for them meant even more. I couldn't help but notice the residents' clothes. Despite the hot day, all the men wore plain wool pants, long-sleeve shirts, and sturdy boots. I feel like that's not correct historically, but maybe, I don't know. Hats and suspenders were common, as were mustaches and beards. The women all wore long dresses, some more fancy than others, but none more fancy than the plainest dress in a modern closet. And nobody asked why she's wearing overalls. Sturdy boots or sandals were the ladies' favorite footwear. Did they wear sandals? Maybe they did. Some of the older women wore white bonnets, while most of the girls my age and younger wore their hair in braids. I feel like he just has kind of like an idea of what people look like historically, but like didn't actually do any sort of research. After he passed by, the people would step into the road behind the wagon, and follow us. And soon there was a pleasant mix of music, laughter, and chatter. As we moved along, I noticed one little girl with blue eyes and light brown hair trying to keep up with us. She wore only a ragged gray dress and no shoes. She held up a small piece of paper, and every few moments would try to dart between other children to reach the prophet, but her path kept getting blocked, sorry. Her mother followed closely behind and would encourage her to try again, but after the 6th or 7th try, both mother and daughter were near tears. I tapped Brigham's knee and pointed to the girl. That little girl has tried desperately to reach you. Please let her greet you. Brigham caught sight of her. Then he told Jake to stop the wagon. Brigham stepped off the road and said, I need a hug from that sweet little girl in the gray dress. The mother and daughter looked at each other excitedly. The crowd parted, and the girl ran on her tippy toes to the prophet. Brigham swept her up in his arms and planted a wet kiss on his cheek. Oh, and she planted a wet kiss on his cheek. Sorry. And she timidly said, I made this for you. She handed him the paper, which contained the words, I love you. It's ILUV you. Like I said, I don't think people would write like that, but okay. Brigham thanked her, gave her a hug, then sent her scurrying back to her mother. As Brigham got back on the wagon, I wiped my misty eyes and reached out to put the paper with the other gifts he received. He began to hand me the paper, but then pulled it back and put it in his shirt pocket. I'll hang on to this one. We passed to a new 2-story meeting house on the corner of Center and Main Street. God, we're not even through this whole parade. Okay, when I was accustomed to seeing the city's fire station. Then we crossed Hobble Creek over a sturdy wooden bridge before arriving at Bishop Errand Johnson's large home at the northeast corner of 100 North and Main Street. The motion of the parade died down, and most of the people in town crowded around Bishop Johnson's home. I was still in awe at what I had experienced, but I had calmed down enough to try to figure out what year it was. I knew Springville had been founded in 1850, and it looked like it had been around for several years, and I vaguely remember that Brigham Young had died in 1877. Brigham was looking older, but he was nowhere near death. He had said that Finnerty had been living near Heber for a few years. I remembered that Finnerty had God, she's like a mathematician. Like I said, she's not an airhead. If she knows all this math in her head. Anyway, I remember that Finnerty had arrived to the Salt Lake Valley in 1864, so it probably had dropped into the late 1860s. The Evergreen Cemetery where he'd hit my head would be created for more than 20 years. Things could have certainly been worse, but I felt depressed at the thought of life without cars, telephones, or TVs. As I got off the wagon, I realized something else was missing. Indoor plumbing. Listen, I'm with you. I could never go back to like the 1800s for that reason. I stepped through the crowd and asked one girl at a group of teenagers on the porch where the restroom was. One girl said, "Restroom? What's she talking about?" The other girls gave me confused looks, but I danced from one leg to the other. They pointed to a brightly colored outhouse near the barn. I rushed in, closed the latch, and held my breath as much as possible. As I sat there, I found a slightly weathered copy of the Deseret News. The date on the newspaper banner was July 15th, 1868. Phew, now I knew I wouldn't make a fool of myself by asking what year it was. As I finished, I realized the paper wasn't in the outhouse for casual reading. Oh, how I wished for a single roll of modern toilet paper. I emerged from the outhouse and moved back through the crowd just as the prophet climbed to a wagon to address the group. "Hello, wonderful saints of Springville," Brigham called out. "Thank you for the rousing welcome. We had an uplifting meeting this morning with the saints in Spanish Fork, and I wish to speak to you tonight in the meeting at 7 o'clock. See you there." Brigham got down at the wagon and began to greet those who gathered around him. I stood back waiting for Brigham to notice me. I began moving in my direction, and I waved to him when he looked my way. He called out, "Emma, Sister Johnson is waiting for you in the house." Then he was engulfed again by the crowd. I walked to the porch where I was met by a smiling, middle-aged lady. "Come in, dear," she said. "I understand you've had a long day. I'm Sister Johnson, but please call me Rachel." Rachel led me into the spacious kitchen filled with delicious aromas. "Please take a seat at the table," she said. "You can eat while I take a look at the bump on your head," she said. She went to the kitchen's small fireplace, and lifted the pot hanging over the low flame. She scooped out a heaping bowl of beef stew and placed it before me, then brought a big chunk of warm homemade bread dripping with butter, and a glass of cool spring water. "This is delicious," I said. "President Young said you'd be hungry," she said. "Eat as much as you'd like." I ravenously ate what was before me, and Rachel wasted no time in refilling my bowl. As I worked on my second helping of stew, Rachel stood before me and gently touched my forehead. "That's quite a bruise," she said. "How did this ever happen?" "I tripped and hit my head on a rock. Looks like the rock won the battle, but you should be fine." She dipped the cloth into a bowl of water and cleaned the injury. "Your clothing has really taken a beating. Why don't you change into one of my dresses?" Again, nobody's mentioned the fact that she's wearing overalls. She went into the other room and brought back a pleasant-looking dress, complete with petticoats. I looked down at myself and saw that my shirt was hopelessly mud-stained, and my jumper was no longer denim blue. It was now denim black. "Thank you," I said. "I'm really a mess, aren't I?" It's a weird thing to ask somebody. Rachel smiled and pointed the way up to the bedroom. "I filled a wash basin in there if you'd like to clean up." I gratefully took the dress from her, entered the bedroom, and shut the door latch. I slipped out of my grimy clothes, took a cloth, and dipped it into the wash basin. I wiped the cloth along with the base of my neck, and I astonished at all the dirt that came off. I again soaked the cloth and washed my face. The cloth had turned black with grime. Why hadn't anyone told me how muddy I was? I forgot she was muddy. Imagine this like muddy girl in overalls, like asking you where the restroom was, and you're from the 1800s. Hashtag relatable. Oh, okay. These people surely thought I was a savage. Okay. I don't know if she meant that in a certain way. I brushed my hair and got the mud out of it, but I really could have used a shower. The dress I had been given seemed a bit heavy, especially for July afternoon, but it felt comfortable. Then I slipped my sandals back on and looked around the room. The furnishings were modest and with just a wash basin, a chest of drawers, and a bed frame holding a straw-filled mattress. The sight of that bed made me feel exhausted. I opened the door and Rachel turned down to look at me at the table, and she was kneading bread dough. "Oh, Emma, that dress fits you well," she said, "and your face looks much cleaner." "It feels cleaner," I said. "I fell into a stream this afternoon, but I couldn't rinse myself off this very well. Thank you for your kindness." I looked longingly back into the bedroom. "Rachel, I was wondering if I'd take a little nap on the bed. I feel very tired." "That would be fine, I suppose. Let me gather your dirty clothing and try to clean them tonight," she said. "The family will be going to listen to President Young's message at the meeting house within an hour. Would you like to go with us?" "I'd love to, but I'm afraid I'd fall asleep during the sermon unless I take a nap." She laughed. "Haven't you heard a sermon by President Young?" I shook my head. "Not even the most drowsy person can sleep during his talks. It's like listening to thunder." Okay, so I was wrong with the meek, mild voice that I thought that President Young had. She could see I was nearly asleep on my feet, though, so she motioned me to the bedroom. "You need a rest," she said. "I'll wake you up in a few minutes." I lay down on the mattress. It seemed comfortable enough, and the down-filled pillow seemed heavenly against my face. I pulled a rough textured blanket over me and quickly drifted off it to sleep. It was a deep sleep, but I certainly wasn't very stressful. My dreams were filled with jumbled, strange images. I soon felt Rachel gently shake me several times to wake me up for the meeting, but I couldn't open my eyes. She finally said, "Just keep sleeping, my dear. We'll see you after the meeting." Then the strange dream rolled on. In my in one dream, my family was frantically searching all around Springville for me. In the following dream, I was stuck in that muddy stream again. Leah Jensen was on the bank saying, "You can't get out until you finish your mission." Then I found myself sucked into the mud, buried into the darkness. In the distance, I saw the words Cooper and Denver, brightly illuminated, the only lights in the black void. The words began moving around towards me, and soon they danced around in my head, changing colors and growing larger. Then they began spinning like helicopter blades, and I worried that they would injure me. I ducked twice to avoid getting hit, but then the words' rotations coincided, and I knew I was going to get sliced in half. As the words swung towards me again, I let out a scream of terror. That is a weird scene. I awoke in a darkened room, cowered in fear, but I quickly realized I had just been a crazy dream. It had just been a crazy series of nightmares. Sorry, we're on chapter 5, by the way. Maybe this will be the last chapter. I've already been talking for like 2 hours, so. So chapter 5, I woke in a darkened room, cowering in fear, but I quickly realized there had just been a crazy series of nightmares. Whew. It was nice to be nestled in my bed. I vaguely remembered a dream about Brigham Young and traveling to Springville. Then those crazy dreams about my family, Leah Jensen, and those spinning words. Then the door slid open and a lady stuck her head into the room. One note, imagine like he just ended the story with like, "I woke up and it was all a dream." Like, I mean, honestly, I would that wouldn't be like something I'd be surprised with Chad. Let's have another candy break. Okay, yeah. "Emma, what's wrong?" she said. "We've heard you cry out. It was Rachel. I was really trapped in 1869. I regained my composure and I said, "I'm fine. I just had a terrible dream." "That's understandable. You've had a rough day," she said, "but if you feel up to it, President Young and Bishop Johnson would like to speak with you." I jumped off the bed, quickly fussing with my hair, then walked around with her to the front door. As we entered the room, Brigham stood. "You look much better, Emma. How does your head feel? It doesn't hurt anymore. Rachel took care of me. The sun was setting, and we paused as Rachel ran around the room, lighting a few candles. Brigham thanked her, then said, Emma, I'd like to introduce you to Bishop Errand Johnson. He's been Springville's leading citizen ever since he set up camp at the banks of Hobble Creek in 1850. Errand stood and shook my hand. I knew Errand had been a close associate of Joseph Smith in Nauvoo, having served as Nauvoo's Justice of the Peace for several years. Soon, I was a bit intimidated to be talking to such high-esteemed men. Very nice to meet you, I said. I turned to Brigham. I must apologize for missing that meeting. I just couldn't wake up. Imagine, going to the future, the past, meeting somebody like you've read about in books, looking up to him, and then oversleeping and missing a talk. Very nice to meet you, I said, and turned back to Brigham. Oh yeah, don't worry, Brigham said. I had a feeling you might teach us more tonight than I could have taught you. He motioned for me to sit in a chair across from him, while Rachel sat next to her husband on the sofa. Once we were seated, Brigham said, The Lord has granted me an occasional glimpse of what the future holds for the saints. And during such glimpses, I have seen those valleys bustling with millions of people. There are temples dotting the valleys, but the world is in a terrible commotion. Then he paused, looked at me closely with those gentle, piercing eyes. I don't think your eyes can be gentle and piercing. Maybe they can. I don't know. And in the future, there were no longer walls around these cities. You asked me some peculiar questions today for a person who has supposedly grown up in Springville. I shifted nervously. I'm from Springville, but this is not how I remember it. Brigham nodded. I have prayed concerning your peculiar arrival among us, and the Lord has confirmed that you have come to us from a future time. So Brigham figured it out. Is that true? It took longer for him to figure out that she was from the future than she figured out. She took 3 paragraphs to figure out she was from the past. She was in the past. I let out a sigh of relief, glad there was someone finally seemed to understand my plight. I nodded and said, Yes, that's right. I feel like Brigham, if he actually thought that somebody was from the future, he'd probably burn them at the stake. I think anybody from the past would probably do that. I just find it hard to think that he's come to terms with that, but maybe. Rachel gasped, but Brigham and Errand nodded to each other. They had obviously discussed me. Errand knew every person who had ever lived in Springville, and he'd never seen me before. Come on, Emma, Errand said. We'd like to hear how you arrived here. I went to a funeral this morning in a cemetery located in that juniper grove near south of town, I said. At the cemetery, I tripped and hit my head on a headstone. It knocked me out, and when I woke up, I found myself in the same place, but in a different time. I saw a man riding a horse on the road below me, so I walked to that direction and eventually jumped in front of President Young's wagon. So now here I am. I've traveled more than 130 years back in time. Then they all looked at me in astonishment, but they seemed to believe me, so I said, when I live, is a great time to be a member of the church. I was raised in Springville, which in my day has a population of more than 22,000 people. Provo has 100,000 residents, and BYU is well respected around the world. What is BYU? Brigham asked. I couldn't help laughing. I guess you haven't founded it yet. BYU stands for Brigham Young University, and more than 27,000 students attended school there. In fact, I plan to enroll there myself. Oh, she's not even in college yet. I thought she was already in college. Okay, maybe. A university in Provo, Brigham said. I'll have to ponder that idea. Dang, she foretold. Okay. There's some meta stuff happening right now. I suddenly felt like I had said too much, but Errand was perched on the edge of the sofa. He said, Did they have sofas back then? I don't know. He said, I feel like what you said is true, despite how impossible it seems. Could you tell us more about the church in your time? Is it prospering? I told him that the church had wards in nearly every nation, with nearly 60,000 missionaries preaching the gospel. How is that possible? Aaron asked. Are half the men in church on missions? No, the missionaries are mainly young single men, I said. Church membership is now more than 11 million members. That sent them rocking back in their seats. Amazing! Rachel exclaimed. Who would have dreamed of such numbers? To further convince them, I added that it's well known in my day that the Salt Lake Temple was built with empty shafts and holes in the granite walls for a future purpose. I explained how elevators and electric lights have been added to the temple. Brigham nodded. That's right. My design has spaces for future uses. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay. The walls are now only a few feet above the ground, but someday we'll complete it. You will, I said. It's a magnificent building, and in my day it's recognized through the world as a symbol of the faithfulness of the saints. That's this silence. So Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I don't know. My internet just keeps like going low. Like I said, this is the last chapter. Hopefully, y'all heard that. If not, I might have to go over it again. That's wonderful news, Aaron said, as they slipped into silence. All this information was taking time for them to digest. Brigham had put his hands on his chin and stared out the window. The silence was deafening to me, and I nearly babbled on when Brigham said, I feel your journey here involves temple work. But why? We don't even have a finished temple. If we hadn't been driven from Nauvoo and our beloved temple there, things would be different. But it is in your day, not ours, that temple work would blossom into magnificent splendor. I feel the same way, I said. There must be information about my ancestors here that has been lost or destroyed in my day. I took them about the glowing words I'd seen. Cooper obviously referred to my mother's family, I said, but Denver doesn't make any sense. None of my ancestors lived there. But that's where you'll find your answers, Brigham said. Your purpose will become clear as you travel there. To Denver? How long will that take? I asked. In my time, we can reach Denver in less than a day. How long does it take a train to get there? They broke into laughter. For a year or two. Then you can take the train, Aaron said. Right now, we lack both the train and the tracks. A trip to Denver takes 4 weeks on horseback and even longer with a wagon. Walking is the only other way. A gloom settled onto the road. Then Brigham's face lit up. I feel the solution depends on your relative Benedy Dalton. He will somehow help you reach Denver. Aaron, would you be able to spare 2 of your sons for days to guide Emma to Heber? Of course, President. Very good, Emma. I'll write a letter for you to give to Finnerty. I'll make it clear I expect him to help you in any ways he can. But we shouldn't tell him or anyone else about your journey through time. Ern and Rachel have heard me speak privately about the upcoming century, and I know they won't tell anyone what they've heard tonight. But most of the saints aren't ready for such talk. It would be best to keep a low profile and not mention the future. Agreed? Yes, President, I said. You've been so helpful. I'm grateful we crossed paths. He smiled kindly. Once you leaped in front of my wagon, I didn't have much choice in the matter, did I? Everyone was up by sunrise as we prepared to travel to Provo. It was July 24th, and 21 years earlier on this day, Brigham Young had looked across the Salt Lake Valley and proclaimed, "This is the right place." Okay, I'm done with that. Something fell. All right. A big picnic celebration was planned in Provo, and several Springville families, including the Johnsons, would make the trip from there. Two of Bishop Johnson's sons would lead me on horseback through Provo Canyon to the Dalton farm. I had stayed up late with Rachel, cleaning my clothes, and it felt good to wear them again. I put my hair in ponytails. They climbed at the back, like pigtails? Ponytails? Okay. They climbed into the back of the Johnson's wagon. We departed on sunrise, passing through Springville's northern gate, and worked our way across what is now known as Ironton Hill. By late morning, we turned west onto Provo Center Street, where the other brass band and usual pomp greeting of prophecy, I could see a great city forming as they looked at the two-story brick buildings that were sprouting up in a row. Okay. The wagon traffic was surprisingly heavy, even though I'm sure President Young's visit caused most of it. Our bumpy 4-hour ride ended at what is now Pioneer Park on 500 West. I mean, she's like Google Maps over here. Once the wagon stopped, everyone scampered off to greet friends, leaving me alone. I didn't mind, and I joined the crowd watching the brass band play. A few fiddle players and a washboard player had joined them, along with an older, white-haired man holding the glass jug. The band launched into an extremely upbeat version of The Spirit of God, and I clapped along, chuckling as the man played the jug. I hope she's not going to start dancing. He puffed with all his might, trying to keep up with the band's tempo. The jug's slow hoot, hoot, hoot added a nice bass sound for a few minutes until the man comically fell to the ground, visibly worn out. The crowd laughed and cheered, and he stood and bowed solemnly before grabbing his jug and rejoining the band. See, this is what I mean. Like when I say that Chad doesn't like understand how people like would act in certain situations. Like if an old man was like blowing on a jug and passed out, like first of all, it wouldn't be comical. I think most people would ask how he was doing, unless he was doing it on purpose, but I don't think he was. I noticed Brigham standing near the park stage talking animately with a tall, dark young man. I hate to interrupt, but I wanted to say goodbye to Brigham before I left the Johnson boys. I walked up behind them and gently tapped his shoulder. He looked back in surprise, and he broke into a wide grin. "Hello, dear sister. Are you about to leave?" "Yes, but I wanted to thank you again for the help you've given me. It was such a pleasure. Let me introduce you to this young man." Oh, it was such a pleasure. "Let me introduce you to this young man, Joseph F. I'd like you to meet Miss Emma Dalton, a visitor from Springville." A man looked over his stovepipe hat and kindly shook my hand. "Nice to meet you," he said. I'm Joseph Smith, or Joseph F, as they called me around here." Okay, I don't know why. I was like, is this the actual Joseph Smith? No, it's not. Joseph F was set apart as a member of the Quorum of the 12 last year at the ripe old age of 28, Brigham said. "He's so talented. The Lord called him to be one of my counselors, besides being on the Provo City Council. He's an amazing young man with great things ahead of him." Joseph stammered in embarrassment. Brigham gave me a wink and said, "He's still a young pup, though, still learning how to run things, but it's nice to know the church will be in good hands as long after I'm gone." Then Brigham changed the subject. "Joseph F., didn't you run into Finity Dalton during your mission to England?" "I sure did," Joseph said, gladly to talk about anything but himself. "He had joined the church years ago, but he never came to Zion. We convinced him that it was time to come. Emma is leaving today to visit Finity and his family near Heber." "Really? I'm sure to tell you. Be sure to tell him hello, and tell Mary I miss her cooking." He poked a finger at his skinny frame. "She helped keep a little bit of meat on these bones when I was in England." We chuckled, then a bugle sounded. "That's my signal," Joseph said. "It's time to get the celebration started." He shook my hand again and climbed onto the stage. He had turned into a fine young man, Brigham said to me. He's as fearless and faithful as his father, Hiram, and Uncle Joseph were. He's Joseph Smith's son. Oh no, he's Joseph Smith's nephew, sorry. Hiram Smith's. He glanced. Well, I better get up here. I quickly stepped in front of him and gave him a hug. Did they hug like the opposite gender back then? I don't know. I need to get started on my journey, I said. Thanks for believing me. You're very welcome, he said, but don't leave without this. He pulled the letter out of his jacket and gave it to me. Once Finity reads this, I'm sure he'll help you in every way. Good luck. It's been a pleasure to meet you. He started towards the stage, then turned back. By the way, what do people in the United States in your day think of old Brigham? They said you did an amazing job leading the Saints to the West. There's even a statue of you in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. Brigham's eyes widened. That's a surprise. Does my statue have horns on my head with a devilish tail? He grinned, then touched my shoulder. Have a safe trip. He turned and climbed to the stage as Joseph began the ceremonies. Dozens of saints now crowded around me, and I worked his way through them towards the street. But I took one last look at Brigham and Joseph, two prophets of the Lord, one currently leading the church and one who was foreordained to some day do soon. I thank the Lord for allowing me to feel the power of Brigham's leadership skills and his closeness to the Spirit. He was an inspired man, and without him to point me in the right direction, I would have failed on the mission that lay before me. And I feel like that's a good place to start. We're at page 33, chapter 6. Or good place to end, sorry. That's what I meant. Yeah, because I've been reading for 2 hours. So I feel like with the amount of time we've already gone, and also every single page I've read has like fallen out. I think this will probably be a two-parter. I mean, hopefully I can like stop commentating so much, but like I said, this is not an audiobook. So what have we learned so far? We learned that Emma is insecure. She thinks she's an airhead, but I don't think she understands what the word airhead is, or more so, I don't think Chad knows, but I feel like with the qualities that Chad has, they are one and the same. I forgot I said I was going to stop drinking that. Okay. We learned that Emma, despite being an airhead, figured out that she was in the past. Like, it only took her like 5 seconds. Brigham Young figured out that she was in the future. Oh, also, we learned that Brigham, like, she just so happened to like find Brigham Young, the like one person she runs in front of, is literally like not the founder, second prophet of the church. And that nobody thinks it's weird that she is wearing overalls. And also, I just realized, like, they spent all night washing her clothes. They wouldn't have dried by the morning. Maybe they, like, put them over the fire or something, but I don't think it takes that long. Sorry, I'm looking for, like, flavor. That's not... Okay. So, yeah. I don't know. We just found that people, like, are very accepting that, like, if you figure out somebody's from the past or the future, it only takes like 5 seconds to come to terms with it. And we're getting a very good insight into what Chad believes, like, people think about, like, Brigham Young. Obviously we're seeing this through an LDS, like a devout Mormon lens. But it's clear that, like, Chad doesn't understand that, like, a life outside the Mormon bubble. And I get it. This is literally a Mormon story. So And this is also a book written for Mormons. But I don't know. I forgot how boring the first book is. I think it kind of picks up in like book 2 or 3. I've heard that this one's tame compared to his other books, which might be a good thing, because there are some things that are a little bit disturbing. Should I do a thumbnail? But yeah, I honestly, this is all that what I expected. Thoughts? I don't know. So yeah, we're gonna continue with this true crime story time. LDS Chad LDS edition. I'm wondering how many cameos we're gonna see in his books. So far, his first cameo is Brigham Young, so that's a big spot to fill. I'm wondering if Joseph Smith will pop up at one time, or Jesus himself. I have no doubt that Jesus will eventually pop up in his books. But yeah, that was something. I think I'm ready to lay down. Ready to go to bed. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed and got something out of this. I don't know. Like I said, I've been interested in reading Chad's books. And I think from what I've heard, in his other more like apocalyptic books, there's a lot of like, look into his criminal mind and what he was thinking even at a younger age. We could see that Chad, even in his 20s, was very insecure and saw the world quite differently from what a normal quote unquote person would see. And also that I don't think that he knows how people would act, and that kind of makes me think that maybe he does kind of have like some sort of like I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. Sorry if you couldn't hear me. My camera keeps coming out. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go because I think my internet's just bad right now. Maybe it's the weather. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one, or I'll see you in either part 2 or another video that I make before this. But yeah, all right, have a great night, everybody. Bye.